The wealthiest person you know probably lives below their means. Not because they have to, but because they discovered something most people spend their entire lives missing. While everyone else is measuring success by what they can show, the truly wealthy are measuring it by what they can choose. And that difference, that single shift in perspective, separates those who build wealth from those who simply chase it. We've been sold a story about money that doesn't work. The narrative goes like this: work hard, earn more, buy more, feel better. It's clean, it's simple, and it's completely backwards. Because the best money advice you'll ever receive isn't about earning more or investing smarter or finding the perfect budget app. It's about understanding why you want money in the first place, and that answer is almost never what you think it is. Before we go further, if this resonates with you, hit subscribe. This channel exists to challenge the shallow narratives around productivity and wealth, and to dig into the deeper psychology that actually changes lives. Let's continue. Most people treat money as the destination. They think once they reach a certain number in their bank account, once they can afford a certain lifestyle, then they'll feel secure, then they'll feel successful, then they'll finally relax. But here's what actually happens. They reach that number and immediately move the goalpost. The target shifts. The anxiety doesn't disappear, it just finds a new form. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying this phenomenon, and his research revealed something uncomfortable. Beyond a certain threshold, more money doesn't increase happiness or reduce anxiety. What it does is change the flavor of your worries. The people struggling to pay rent worry about eviction. The people earning six figures worry about market corrections. The people with millions worry about estate taxes and which assets to shelter. Different problems, same underlying fear. And that fear has a name: impermanence. We're terrified that what we have will be taken away, that we won't be enough, that our value is tied to our net worth. So we accumulate, we optimize, we compare, and in doing so, we miss the entire point. Here's the advice no one tells you: money is not the goal. Freedom is. And freedom doesn't come from having more, it comes from needing less. Not in the sense of deprivation or minimalism for its own sake, but in the sense of clarity. When you know what actually matters to you, when you've separated your real needs from the manufactured desires that advertising and culture have planted in your mind, you stop living in reaction to external pressures. You start living according to internal values. And that shift changes everything. Let's be clear about what this means practically. It means the person driving a 10-year-old car who has no debt and 6 months of expenses saved is wealthier than the person driving a luxury vehicle on a loan with 2 weeks of runway if they lose their job. Wealth isn't what you show. It's what you keep. It's the gap between what you earn and what you spend. It's the choices you preserve for yourself when everyone around you is trading future freedom for present appearances. The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote extensively about wealth, and one of his central insights was this: it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. That sentence, written 2,000 years ago, describes our current economy perfectly. We are drowning in abundance while feeling perpetually scarce. We have more access to goods, services, entertainment, and information than any generation in human history, and yet we feel behind. We feel lacking. We feel like we need just a little bit more. This isn't an accident. It's by design. Every advertisement you see, every influencer you follow, every luxury brand that positions itself just out of reach, is engineering a sense of inadequacy. They profit when you believe you're not enough as you are. They profit when you believe the solution to your internal discomfort is an external purchase. And the trap is incredibly effective because it offers temporary relief. You buy the thing, you feel good for a moment, the dopamine hits, and then it fades. and you're back to searching for the next hit. Breaking this cycle requires something most people aren't willing to do: sit with discomfort. When you feel the urge to buy something, when you feel the pull toward upgrading your lifestyle, when you scroll through social media and feel that familiar ache of comparison, you have to pause. You have to ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? What need am I trying to meet? And is this purchase genuinely going to meet it, or is it just going to distract me from the real issue? 9 times out of 10, the real issue isn't financial. It's emotional. You're not buying a new phone because your current one doesn't work. You're buying it because you want to feel current, relevant, part of the group that has the latest technology. You're not upgrading your car because it's unsafe. You're upgrading it because you want people to see you differently. You're not buying those clothes because you have nothing to wear. You're buying them because you're trying to construct an identity, and in our culture, identity is purchased. So here's the first piece of real advice. Audit your spending, not for budget optimization, but for psychological honesty. Go through your bank statements from the last 3 months. Look at every non-essential purchase. And for each one, write down what you were feeling before you bought it. Were you stressed, bored, lonely, excited, trying to impress someone, trying to prove something to yourself? This exercise is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront the gap between who you think you are and how you actually behave. But it's also liberating, because once you see the pattern, once you understand that most of your spending is emotional regulation disguised as necessity, you can start addressing the actual emotions instead of medicating them with purchases. The second piece of advice builds on the first. Automate your savings before you automate your spending. Most people set up automatic payments for their bills, their subscriptions, their memberships. All the outflows are automated. But the inflows, the money that's supposed to go toward building wealth, that's manual. That's something they do if there's money left over at the end of the month. And there's never money left over at the end of the month. This is backwards. Pay yourself first. Automate a percentage of every paycheck to go directly into savings or investment accounts before you even see it. This isn't revolutionary advice, but almost no one does it consistently. Why? Because it requires acknowledging that future you matters as much as present you. It requires delayed gratification. It requires trust that you'll be okay with less available cash right now in exchange for more freedom later. Psychologist Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow experiment demonstrated that children who could delay gratification, who could wait for 2 marshmallows instead of eating one immediately, had better life outcomes decades later. They earned more, had healthier relationships, handled stress better. The ability to tolerate short-term discomfort for long-term gain is one of the strongest predictors of success in any domain. And with money, it's non-negotiable. But here's where it gets interesting. Delayed gratification doesn't mean perpetual sacrifice. It doesn't mean never enjoying your money, never spending on things that bring you joy. It means being intentional. It means spending on what aligns with your values and cutting ruthlessly on what doesn't. Most people do the opposite. They spend unconsciously on 1,000 small things that don't matter, and then feel guilty about spending on the few big things that actually would enhance their lives. If you value travel, spend on travel. If you value learning, spend on courses and books and experiences that expand your understanding. If you value relationships, spend on quality time with people you love. But if you don't care about fashion, stop buying clothes you don't need. If you don't care about cars, stop upgrading vehicles. If you don't care about having the latest technology, stop replacing things that still work. This requires self-knowledge. It requires you to separate your authentic preferences from the preferences you think you should have based on what everyone around you is doing. And that separation is difficult because we're social creatures. We're wired to conform, to fit in, to signal our status through consumption. Fighting that wiring feels like swimming upstream. But here's the thing: everyone else is drowning. Following the current doesn't lead to safety. It leads to the same destination everyone else is heading toward, which is debt, stress, and a life spent working to maintain a lifestyle that doesn't actually make them happy. If you want a different outcome, you need different inputs. You need to be willing to look weird to people who are living in ways you don't want to emulate. The third piece of advice is this: measure wealth by time, not money. How long could you maintain your current lifestyle if your income stopped tomorrow? 1 week? 1 month? 6 months? A year? That number is your real wealth. That number is your actual freedom. Everything else is just scorekeeping. Most high earners have almost no time wealth. They're locked into expensive lifestyles that require constant income to maintain. They can't take risks. They can't say no to their boss. They can't pivot careers or start businesses or take time off to reassess. They're trapped by their own success. Meanwhile, someone earning less but spending far below their means has options. They have breathing room. They have the luxury of choice. And choice, at its core, is what wealth actually buys. The ability to choose how you spend your time. The ability to choose who you work with. The ability to choose where you live and how you live and what you pursue. Money is just the tool. Freedom is the goal. This brings us to the fourth piece of advice, and it's the one that most people resist the most. Stop optimizing for income and start optimizing for autonomy. We live in a culture that worships high earners. The 6-figure salary, the 7-figure net worth, the executive title, and there's nothing wrong with earning well. But when you pursue income at the expense of control over your time, when you take the high-paying job that demands 80-hour weeks and constant availability, when you build a lifestyle that requires every dollar you make, you haven't built wealth. You've built a very expensive prison. Naval Ravikant, entrepreneur and philosopher, puts it simply: retire as soon as you can, even if you have to work. What he means is this: structure your life so that you're only doing work you would choose to do even if you didn't need the money. That might mean earning less. It probably means living below your means. But it definitely means waking up without resentment, without the constant pressure of financial obligation dictating your choices. This isn't about early retirement in the traditional sense. It's about designing a life where work is a choice, not a necessity. Where you're pulled toward what you do rather than pushed by bills and debt and lifestyle inflation. And getting there requires strategic sacrifice. It requires saying no to the immediate status bump that comes with a bigger salary and a bigger lifestyle. It requires playing a different game than everyone around you. Here's the uncomfortable truth: most people will think you're making mistakes. When you drive an older car, when you live in a smaller home, when you don't upgrade your lifestyle as your income grows, people will assume you're struggling or cheap or somehow failing at the game. Let them assume that. Their opinions are based on rules you're no longer playing by. The fifth piece of advice ties everything together: invest in assets, not liabilities. This sounds basic, but most people misunderstand what these words mean. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket over time. A liability is something that takes money out. Your home, unless you're renting out rooms or plan to downsize significantly, is a liability. It costs you money every month in mortgage, maintenance, taxes, and insurance. Your car is a liability. Your wardrobe is a liability. Real assets are things like index funds that grow and pay dividends. Rental properties that generate income. Businesses you own. Skills you develop that increase your earning potential. Knowledge you gain that compounds over time. These are the things that build actual wealth, not perceived wealth. And here's the key distinction. Building perceived wealth makes you look rich. Building actual wealth makes you free. Most people are optimizing for the former when they should be optimizing for the latter. They want the appearance of success more than they want the reality of freedom. And that choice, repeated over years, creates lives that look impressive from the outside but feel suffocating from the inside. Philosopher Alan Watts once asked, "What if money was no object? What would you do with your life?" Most people can't even begin to answer that question honestly because they've never given themselves permission to consider it. They've been so focused on what they should do, what's practical, what pays well, that they've lost touch with what they actually want. But here's the paradox. When you focus on building real wealth, on creating freedom rather than appearances, you often end up with both. Because the habits that build wealth, living below your means, investing consistently, developing valuable skills, thinking long-term, these same habits tend to create opportunities. They create resilience. They create the space to take risks that lead to genuine success, not just the performance of success. The person who's financially secure can take the lower-paying job that aligns with their interests. They can invest time in learning new skills without immediate payoff. They can start the business they've been thinking about. They can say no to opportunities that don't fit. And these freedoms, this autonomy, this is what opens doors that no amount of salary climbing can access. So let's talk about how to actually implement this. Because understanding the psychology of wealth is different from living it. And the gap between knowledge and action is where most people fail. Start with 1 month. For 30 days, track every dollar you spend and every emotion you feel when you spend it. Don't change your behavior yet, just observe it. Notice the patterns. Notice what triggers spending. Notice what you buy when you're stressed versus when you're calm. Notice what purchases you regret an hour later versus what purchases still feel good a week later. After that month, identify your top 3 emotional spending triggers. Is it boredom, comparison, stress, celebration? Whatever they are, create alternative responses. If you spend when you're bored, have a list of free activities ready. If you spend when you're stressed, develop a practice like walking or journaling that addresses the stress directly. If you spend when you're comparing yourself to others, limit social media or unfollow accounts that trigger that response. Next, calculate your time wealth number. Add up your savings and divide it by your monthly expenses. That's how many months you could survive without income. If that number is less than 3, your first priority is building it to 3. Then 6, then 12. This isn't about pessimism or fear. It's about creating a foundation of security that allows you to make choices based on what you want rather than what you're afraid of. Then automate your wealth building. Set up automatic transfers to savings and investment accounts that happen immediately after you get paid. Start with whatever percentage doesn't make you panic. 5%, 10%, 20% if you can. The specific number matters less than the habit. You're training yourself to prioritize future freedom over present consumption. After that, conduct a lifestyle audit. List every recurring expense you have. Subscriptions, memberships, services, habits. For each one, ask, does this align with my actual values, or is it just something I've been doing? Cancel anything that doesn't pass that test. The money you free up can go toward the things that actually matter or toward building your foundation of freedom. Finally, define what enough looks like for you. This is the hardest and most important step. In a culture of endless comparison and infinite upgrading, you need a clear target. What does a good life actually look like for you? Not for your parents, not for your peers, not for the influencers you follow. For you, what income level would feel sufficient? What kind of home would feel comfortable without being excessive? What experiences matter more than possessions? Write it down. Be specific. And then when you reach those targets, practice the discipline of not moving them. This is radical in a world that constantly tells you more is better. But enough is enough. And knowing that, feeling that, living that, is the ultimate form of wealth. Carl Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Your version of enough will look different from everyone else's. That's not just okay, it's necessary. The tragedy is living according to someone else's definition while calling it your own. We've covered 5 core pieces of advice that no one tells you about money. Understand that freedom, not accumulation, is the goal. Audit your spending for psychological honesty. Automate wealth building before lifestyle inflation. Measure wealth by time rather than dollars. And invest in assets that create autonomy, not liabilities that create obligation. None of this is complicated, but all of it is difficult, because it requires you to swim against the current of culture, to resist the constant pressure to consume, to value freedom over appearances, to trust that having less in the short term creates more in the long term. But here's what happens when you do this consistently. You wake up one day and realize you're no longer stressed about money. Not because you're rich in the traditional sense, but because you're free in the meaningful sense. You can make choices based on what matters rather than what pays. You can take risks because you have runway. You can say no because you don't need the income. You can say yes because you actually want to, not because you have to. That's the best money advice you'll ever hear. Not a strategy or a hack or an investment tip, but a fundamental reorientation toward what money is actually for. It's for buying freedom. It's for creating options. It's for giving yourself the space to become who you actually want to be rather than who economic pressure forces you to be. If this perspective resonates with you, if you're ready to stop playing the game everyone else is playing and start building actual wealth instead of performing wealth, subscribe to this channel. We're going deeper into the psychology of productivity, success, and autonomy in every video. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, take one action from what we discussed today. Not 5 actions. 1. Because one action done consistently beats 5 actions understood intellectually. The wealthiest person you know probably lives below their means. Now you know why. Now you know what they discovered that changed everything. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?